This is the end of the beginning. Welcome to today's show. And this very well could be the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning for this channel. So if you haven't subbed yet to my backup channels, please do so now. This video will contain information that could possibly get a strike. I have in the past for talking about Plum Island and how the government has weaponized things like ticks and mosquitoes to spread viruses. And, well, it's pretty much what a real bio war is. We always hear that term thrown around about bioweapons, and nobody looks at the insects, and Bill Gates releasing millions of mosquitoes, GMO-created mosquitoes, the creation of Lyme disease, which I've covered over the years. Of course, all this stuff resides in the government's hands. Nobody asks questions because nobody says, hey, how come all of a sudden there's a disease that's never been here before and it just suddenly popped up? Well, it's because the government creates it. And speaking of that, hopefully you all have subscribed to my other channels, because let's get into it. What is one thing that we know the government is hell-bent on right now? Well, many things, right? Control, climate, and of course, they don't want us to eat meat, right? One of the top agendas when all these rich people get together while they're eating a steak and eating human meat is them talking about how meat is bad for us. Now, they've convinced a large portion of society that meat is bad for you. Most kids out there hear about meat and they're like, oh yeah, that's bad for you, right? They don't realize that actually, if you just were on a meat diet, well, something your cholesterol might go up. You'll actually lose a lot of weight. We wouldn't have an obese society. That's a proven fact. The people who strictly eat meat, they have less of an appetite. They're able to control their appetite. They don't need to take supplements and things to control it. Now, I'm not somebody who's going to go out here and tell you what you should and shouldn't eat. Everyone's an adult. They can make their own decisions for them. I'm just telling you that the government is hell-bent on taking meat away from us, not because of the climate, because they want not just control of our food supply, but they also want us unhealthy and sick. So, conveniently, a few years ago, about 10 years ago, you may have heard of a disease that even doctors, they claim, which is this clip I'm going to show you, the doctors don't even know that this exists, and that is that there's a tick bite. I can't even believe I'm reading this, but there's actually a tick bite, the Lone Star tick. And the Lone Star tick, if it bites you, it can make you allergic to red meat. So when you connect the dots and you realize the government is hell-bent on cutting off meat, and nobody seems to realize that they're constantly talking about eating bugs now, think about it. Conveniently, we know that they've used ticks before because Lyme disease is linked directly to Plum Island. Plum Island is where the Animal Disease Center used to be located, okay? For the kids out there that don't know, you can look it up yourself. What they did here is they experimented on animals. That's where you'll see freakish photos of animals that have washed up on shore from experiments that are being run. And that's also where Lyme disease is known to have come from. It's actually a fact that it came from there. Right off the coast there was where the first reported case of Lyme disease came from, and that's actually where the name Lyme disease comes from. It comes from Lyme, Connecticut. Go figure. People out there probably think, hey, it's made up the name because they think the ticks like lime and lemon lime, maybe they like Sprite. I don't know. But nobody asks questions. Nobody wonders where these new diseases come from. These spikes in cases of cancer come from with all the soft metals that are being dumped on us from the sky. Nobody asks questions about why men and women who are married can't have kids anymore. Nobody asks questions. They just think this is a natural progression because they're too busy being distracted by nonsensical issues like, can men have babies? So, that being said, conveniently, because this is all coincidental, of course, the government doesn't want us to eat meat. And what's spreading right now like rapid fire? Well, a meat allergy caused by what? Ticks that bite you. And doctors never even heard of it. Listen.
A new summer health alert tonight about a rare red meat allergy linked to ticks. The CDC calling an emerging public health problem and warning cases in the U.S. are on the rise. We get more from Rahima Ellis.
For months, Doreen Swardall suffered extreme joint pain and fatigue.
It took me a year and 4 different doctors to get a diagnosis.
And that diagnosis was alpha-gal syndrome, typically caused by a bite from a Lone Star tick.
That tick bite leads to an allergic response to the alpha-gal sugar that's found in red meat. And after you eat red meat, then you develop the allergic reactions.
Doreen says now she's also allergic to dairy and even gelatin. And according to a new report from the CDC, out of 1,500 doctors surveyed, 42% had never heard of alpha-gal syndrome, and 35% said they weren't confident of their ability to detect or treat it. Symptoms include hives, itching, abdominal pain, vomiting, and chest tightness. The CDC says alpha-gal syndrome, traditionally found in mid-Atlantic states, is spreading. 110,000 suspected cases have been identified since 2010, But experts estimate the true number affected is closer to 450,000.
The challenge is getting to those primary care frontline providers that are seeing patients and having them become aware so we can speed the diagnosis.
Doctors say use tick repellent, do frequent checks, and keep to trails to avoid the kind of precautions Doreen has to take.
Is it fair to say that this has changed your life?
Very fair to say that. Anything I put into my body, I have to monitor.
A call for awareness of an illness understood far too little. Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
And the reason doctors, of course, have never heard of it is because it never existed before the government decided to unleash it on its people, because that's what the government does. Now, I'm going to play some clips of you because in the past, people like myself have spoken up against Plum Island, which they moved to Kansas, of course, because that's one of the main places that we have agriculture and grow food. So why wouldn't we have the Center for Animal Disease located there so that they could do all sorts of harmful experiments on our food supply, which they do. So that's just another coincidence, of course. Nobody asks why we even have the existence of these things. They just continue about their day. Of course, the hardest part for me to wrap my head around is how people don't think that the government would do this to its people when everything that's going on is being caused by the government. All forms of conflict, all forms of racism, all forms of hatred, all this stuff, all this insanity is being caused by our government. They just showed us that they hated us a few years ago, even though they tried to pretend like they were there for us because they were offering it for free. You know what I'm talking about. I don't need to go into detail, but I'm going to show you some clips because it's hilarious how not the mainstream media, but local media had covered over the years talking about Lyme disease. And what were they talking about? Well, they were saying the government, why would the government ever, the military ever use ticks as a way to go after people, as a bioweapon? Well, I don't know. Let's think about that for 1 second. If the government admitted that they wanted to kill all of us and they came out and they rolled military tanks down the streets, well, then the people would turn on the government and they would all band together and they'd say, everybody who has a gun, let's get together because there's more of us than them. The military is not as big as the amount of civilians that are here. But if we do something that the people would never know and we unleash it on them and we could just say it's a bug, it's a disease, it's a tick, it's happening from the weather, well, who are they going to blame? They're going to blame nothing and no one. And we're all just going to listen to what the government tells us as they herd us into slavery, right? So that's why the government would create diseases and ticks and mosquitoes, et cetera, and they always have, and they always will. Because like I said, there's always got to be a boogeyman. And the boogeyman in reality doesn't exist because it's your own government, wherever you're listening to this from, in your own country. They're all placed there now. They've got full control. That's why they're going forward with this. Let's listen to some of the absolute moronic people who actually have been studying ticks for so many years but don't think it's possible. And even if it was, why would the government ever militarize ticks? I don't know.
Straight out of the pages of science fiction, militarized ticks ready to kill. Not like this, riding missiles into the air, but with diseases like Lyme disease. The theory is scientists during the Cold War ran experiments on ticks and other insects to create biological weapons. And somehow those bugs got out, either released on purpose or by accident, which is why some believe we're seeing a big uptick in Lyme disease. In the last 20 years, the CDC says Lyme disease cases have gone up by nearly 300%.
With that big of an increase, it makes sense that people would try to come up with unique ways to explain that.
Right. I think it's just a conspiracy theory. I don't really see it as reality.
Janet Jarnefeld is the tick expert at the Metropolitan Mosquito Control District. She spent the last 30 years studying ticks and says this idea of turning them into weapons is hard to believe.
It doesn't make any sense to me that somebody from the military would be wanting to experiment on a creature that moves so slowly.
And she wonders why Lyme disease, which isn't exactly deadly, it can lead to a lot of problems, but if you're designing a tiny killing machine, she feels there are better options out there.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
For better options, just look at history. During World War II, scientists had all sorts of crazy ideas involving animals. One of them, the bat bomb. The idea was to strap tiny explosives on a bunch of bats and drop them on the enemy. Those bats would then settle into people's attics and would eventually explode, causing panic and fires everywhere. The idea backfired during an experiment when a stray bat burned down a hangar at the base, and the idea was ultimately scrapped. Scientists also created a pigeon-guided missile. That's right, you heard me correctly. So the idea of weaponized ticks isn't as crazy as you'd think, especially not to the author of this book. Bitten, The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons, written by Stanford University science writer Chris Newby, who also directed a documentary on Lyme disease. Another believer, U.S. Congressman Chris Smith from New Jersey, who led the charge earlier this month to get the Department of Defense to look back into its archives and find any proof of these experiments. Congress actually approved the idea, so now we wait to see what they find out.
Will you be interested in finding out what they do uncover?
I will be very interested, and I don't know what's going to happen. I guess that's kind of the fun of science, too. If I get a new fact that's going to make me change my viewpoint on it, then I would change it. But for now, I don't suspect that's going to happen.
A Republican congressman from New Jersey wants the Pentagon to reveal whether it experimented on ticks with the goal of turning them into weapons and whether this led to the spread of Lyme disease in the U.S. Fox News national correspondent Jennifer Griffin has more.
Borrelia burgdorferi, known to millions as Lyme disease, infects more than 300,000 Americans a year. It is spread by infected deer ticks. Not treated, it could lead to neurological damage. Now lawmakers want to know, where did infected ticks come from, and is the Pentagon to blame? Congressman Chris Smith points to a secret Army bioweapons program to weaponize ticks in the 1950s.
Bioweapons specialists stuffed ticks with pathogens to cause severe disability, disease, even death to potential enemies.
Army labs like Plum Island and Fort Detrick, not far from the largest concentration of Lyme cases, were capable of breeding millions of bugs a month. The link was first outlined by Stanford's Chris Newby, who wrote about it in Bitten, The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons. She interviewed William Bergdorfer, who worked for the U.S. military in the 50s growing microbes inside ticks.
They experimented on ticks that could live in cold climates for campaigns against the Russians.
Bergdorfer, for whom Lyme disease was named in 1982, suffered from late-stage Parkinson's. He hinted before he died that the outbreak may have been a bioweapons experiment run amok.
The concern now is that there might have been accidental leaks and exposures, releases.
Smith sponsored an amendment to the Defense Authorization Act that would require the Pentagon's Inspector General to investigate. Newby has been accused by some scientists like Michael Osterholm of concocting a conspiracy theory. Quote, "There's just no credible evidence."
I interviewed one person who worked indirectly for the CIA, and he claims he dropped poison ticks on Cuban sugar workers in 1962 as part of the effort against Castro.
Her critics say Bergdorfer may have been confused by his Parkinson's disease.
He felt really guilty about what he did. I believe that what he was trying to say is, you know, something bad happened here and I want it out before I die.
The House amendment will die unless the Senate votes to keep it in the 2020 Defense Authorization Bill, which would force the Pentagon to investigate whether these weaponized ticks ever got loose. At the Pentagon, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
So they use ticks, they use mosquitoes. This is something that's common, okay? I mean, it's pretty much common knowledge amongst people with common sense about ticks and Lyme disease, but then I start thinking about it, it really isn't, which is scary. I mean, I have been talking about it for a while. I understand I'm just a small YouTuber, very small at this point, but many people should know this because they should just ask the question and say, where do these new diseases come from? Why is there spikes in autism? Why is there spikes in cancer? Why is there spikes in Alzheimer's? Does it have anything to do with those towers with cell phones or anything like that? Does it have anything to do with the metals falling from the sky from the back of airplanes that they call water vapor? It has to do with all of it, potions included. So now conveniently, well, the government's telling us they don't want us to eat red meat, okay? They've tried to tell us over years psychologically not to eat meat. They've constantly talked about how everyone needs to go vegan, all these politicians, nobody believes them because they're horrible actors. This is a horrible operation being run by the CIA. The people that they've put in power, I get it that they're all their puppets and goons, but they are so unconvincing and so bad at what they do, and just you could just smell the bullcrap coming out of their mouths. And I get it that they don't really care because they have total control now, but still, they've done such a poor job of convincing people of all their agendas that they have to do other means and other methods. So a lot of people realize, well, the government's telling us not to eat meat, so I'm going to eat meat. That's what ended up happening. A lot of people said, I'm going to try eating meat and see how I feel instead of eating all of these foods that I eat from the grocery store that comes in boxes that are approved by the FDA that have about 9,000 chemicals in it that I've never heard of. Don't know what this is, don't know what that is, don't know what that is. Oh, I should eat it. Benzoyl, benzene, yeah, it sounds delicious, huh? Instead of eating beef, right? Oh, but beef, it's really, really bad, right? It's bad for the climate too, then after that was the convenient thing to get you not to eat beef. And now, of course, they see so many people haven't listened, they need to unleash the ticks that have something in it that would cause you to be allergic to beef. And like it was pointed out on the website, don't be surprised, because I guarantee it too, it was probably inside of that potion that a lot of people took to make them allergic to meat. Because once you're allergic to meat, you can't eat meat, well, then you really can't eat meat, and you got to start eating other things, and you're not going to get the nutrients you need. Now, I know people are going to come and they're like, well, it's good not to eat meat. Like, that's not true. You could have your own reasons for not eating meat, whether it's biblical, you want to go by the Old Testament, which you can't get. That's fine. I'm not the kind of person that tells you how to live your life, okay? I'm showing you what's going on. If you don't see the psychological operation, when the government tells you to do this, they tell you, don't eat meat, go vegan. No one listens. Then the government says, we got to kill cattle because nobody's carbon emissions. And people don't listen. What's the next thing? Oh, now there's this tick that just came out of thin air in 2010 was the first case reported. Now there's a spike of over 500,000 cases. Wow. And did you hear malaria is spreading in Texas and Florida? Oh, what else happened now? Oh, Bill Gates released mosquitoes, GMO mosquitoes, because that's a great idea because everyone loves mosquitoes. Let's make more of them, right? We all love itching constantly. Right? That's fun, right? This is how the government works. This is a silent war. That's what's going on. And it's not just a silent war with bioweapons and ticks and mosquitoes and things like that in our food and our water. It's a psychological war. They're psychologically convincing people of these things that are happening, and no one's asking simple questions. That's why people like me are censored. Not because I'm the greatest, most knowledgeable. I'm not going to sit here and act like somebody. Maybe I am, but I'm not going to act like that. But I understand that they don't want you actually just critically thinking. There's a new disease. Well, where did it come from? That should be the first question. Oh, well, the first case was reported in 2010. Okay, well, can you tell us how it started? Did a tick have sex with a bat? And then suddenly this disease began, which they're calling this red meat allergy disease, which is just laughable at this point. And now there's hundreds of thousands of cases of it. And you're calling it alpha-gal or whatever this bizarre name is. And we're all supposed to just be like, oh yeah, it's been around forever, right? They don't need to give excuses of where these things come from because nobody asks questions. And when you do, you get silence. And that's how communism works. That's how China works. Don't question the government. Don't question these ridiculous stories that constantly come out. Trust in them. Believe in them. Why would they ever do this to people? Don't then use your common sense to say, well, I might not believe in the history of humanity that they've taught us, but I've seen throughout history that human beings are vicious to other human beings. And they have this obsession with controlling other human beings. You know, just look at Rome. Oh, right. Oh, people have changed so much since then. They're so much nicer now. Is that what we're supposed to believe? Right? It's unbelievable. Question it all. Understand that everything they can point a finger at that's not themselves, they will. You, me, a tick, Mother Nature they like to use, all things that they have the ability to weaponize. And they do, okay? And they do. So conveniently, that's all your brain should be thinking about. You should be saying to yourself, they've been telling us not to eat red meat. They've been telling us not to eat meat. Now they're telling us that we shouldn't worry about our food supply. We should worry about the climate. We should kill poultry, bird flu, kill them. Cattle, it's too hot. They're croaking. All these things with the meat. All these same people, Bill Gates, right? Jeff Bezos, they're all trillionaires. They're all eating meat and flying around in jets. They're all telling us to live this way. Oh, and now, conveniently, a tick has appeared. A tick that's making people allergic to meat. Oh, wow. Once bitten by the tick, you won't be able to eat meat, even if you want to. Yeah, that's not convenient. I think the common people out there are just so dumbed down that they don't think the government has the ability to do these things. And if they just looked up the patents that the government has on bioweapons and all these things that they've created, they'd be amazed, but their brain wouldn't be able to process it. So when you give them documentation like Operation Paperclip, you give them Operation Popeye with the weather, you give them HARP, what the purposes of HARP and what they're capable of doing with the ionosphere, all this stuff. You give them all that stuff, their brain just overloads and they just go to the first answer they automatically can say, and that's a conspiracy theory. Because that's how they think. That's how their brains have been trained. Not to think, not to ask questions. And that's why we are in this shape that we're in. It's bad. So this is a new story. Don't ask questions, ladies and gentlemen. Please make sure you subscribe to my other channels if you haven't. Please heed my warning. I know people out there are like, he's always saying that. Well, proof's in the pudding. I show you the screenshots. You see my channels go. They go. So make sure you sub and you get real information. If you want to become a Patreon, that's another way you can help this work. Don't have a lot. I'm not going to complain about it. I shouldn't have to ask for Patreons. I should be monetized. I should have the number of subs I used to have and the 500,000 at least. If you count all the channels together, it's well over a couple million. I should, but I don't, right? So it is frustrating to see how many channels out there that aren't Christian channels or aren't talking about important stuff like this that have hundreds of thousands of patrons. So, hey, if you got a buck or two, you want to help out, that's a way that you can. I'll still be here working. All you got to do is go over, sign up, and give up a cup of coffee for the month, one day, or whatever, $5 a month, $1 a month. It helps the channel out, helps me create content. And again, I'm going to constantly continue to fight this fight, so fight it with me. I thank you guys for being here. God bless all of you, as always, and your families.